we are, and you'll notice I'll talk about plant families all the time when I'm talking about seeds and planting and things like that. Different plant families have different nutritional needs, and they also have different susceptibilities to disease. And being aware of that can help you prevent the buildup of disease in your garden, and it can also make you aware that you might need to throw a little bit more fertilizer to something because it's sort of stalling out, it's not doing all that great. So I always try and be aware of that sort of stuff when I'm planting. And like I said, a couple of years ago, we were really gung-ho on everything. I canned a gazillion jars of tomato sauce. Henry and I made relish and pickles and all kinds of stuff. We also had learned we can meat. So if we go to the store, say we want to go to a big box store and there's a really big sale. I mean, there's times when you don't expect to find something and you go in and they've got pork loins for cheap. We'll buy a couple of them and we'll butcher them down and freeze them or can things or whatever, depending on what the item is. And then we have And then we have shelf-stable meat sitting on the shelf, just as if we bought canned meat at the grocery store, except we know what's in there. It's been treated the way we like it. It's safe, but it doesn't have extra quantities of salt or some other ingredient that one or the other of us is sensitive to or things like that. So we really got into this whole thing. But we realized that we were overdoing it a little bit. And by that I mean, I always like to have, when I can tomato sauce for instance, I like to have enough to get me through the winter and at least halfway into the next year. Because that gives me an overlap in there. When you plant a tomato plant, it's going to be a long time before you actually get ripe tomatoes off of that. And it's going to be even longer before you would have enough of those ripe tomatoes to make tomato sauce or any other kind of canned tomato product. So we like to have about 1.5 years on hand at any given moment. But we don't need 3 or 4 years on hand. And it got to the point where we were coming up with that kind of a backlog, which begins to be a problem in terms of storage. I mean, we have a big pantry, and we put in extra shelving, and we did all the sort of things, but it was still a little too much. So we sort of reassessed this past year and toned it down a bit. I have a business in which I make jewelry and dress accessories and things like that for historic reenactors. I specialize mostly in reenactors who deal with 1600 and before. So Greek, Roman, Renaissance, all that kind of stuff, all the way down to Tudor. And there were essentially no events for 2 years during the pandemic, the beginnings of the pandemic. So we were home, and that gave us the opportunity to do things that might not have been able to do before. It gave us the opportunity to go a little gung-ho on certain kinds of vegetables. We experimented a lot. We tried different varieties, and we decided to prune it back. Last year was our first year back in the saddle as far as events were concerned. And we did several events, and we were so rusty, it was ridiculous. If you haven't done something for a while, like if you haven't gone camping for a while, you know, all of a sudden you're looking for things and you're trying to figure out where you put your sleeping bag and you're trying to figure out where this is and everything else. And even though we had done a pretty good job of stashing our stuff, we still have to be careful that we don't wind up with getting to a site and discovering we've forgotten half of everything. So fortunately, I'm a list maker, and I managed to have a pretty good list of stuff. And we decided, because we were gearing up in one aspect of our life last year, that we were going to not plant as much out in the garden as we usually do. We also knew that a friend would be taking care of the yard for the time that we were gone at our longest event, which is really about a month. And he's a great guy, but he's not a gardener. So while he can make sure that the water's working correctly and stuff like that, he's not going to know what to do. He's not going to know what a bug is. He's not going to know any of that stuff. So he can look at a tomato plant and go, oh, look, there's a ripe tomato, and harvest it. But he's not going to go, why, that looks like leaf spot, and you know, and this is what we need to do. No, different thing. So we knew that we couldn't count too much on any complicated process while we were gone. And also, last year was one of those years when every rodent in a 40-mile radius decided that we were a great buffet and they had to come by. And we were using every kind of trap you could think of, and we still were losing most of what we set out. I planted probably about 180, maybe 200 seedlings in the spring that were flowers. And the vast majority of them were eaten. Some of them were eaten to the point where they never came back. And others did manage to come back late in the season. So at that point, we just decided to back off from the garden and focus on the greenhouse. We had been running things in the greenhouse for several years. We have experimented with hydroponics successfully. This year we decided that we would not even do the hydroponics. We were just going to go back to, I have 10-gallon pots that are the black nursery pots. We decided we would go back to the 10-gallon pot theory of life. We set up an irrigation system in there and we grew stuff. Okay? I wanted the automatic watering because you can wear yourself out doing that kind of stuff. And with somebody else taking care of the greenhouse, we knew we had to have a simple system where he could just make sure that everything was watered and not have to come by every day or anything else like that. So we, once again at the end of the season, looked at all our veggies that we'd grown. And we do this every year, so it's not anything unusual. We did this every year for as long as we've been gardening, which is pretty much since we were married, which is like 1,000,000 years. And we decided that we were going to do things a little different. So in our video the other day, we mentioned the fact that we are eliminating 3 of the vegetable beds in the yard. Now, those beds historically have been used for tomatoes and carrots and onions and what else has been planted there? Rhubarb. One of them was used for rhubarb for a few years. The rhubarb has been moved to a different location. And last year we left those beds fallow. And just leaving a bed fallow means we kind of cleaned them up. We tried to control the weeds as much as we could, and did great until the end of the year when all of a sudden we had this amazing crop of grass come up. But Henry and I cleared those beds the other day. We've got 2 of the 3 beds that we're going to use cleared with cardboard down so that the weeds, any weed that seeds that do sprout will get smushed. And we're going to leave it that way until spring when the stuff we're going to plant there comes in. So we have 1 more bed to do, and my goal is actually to continue the process and get some of the other beds done. We have a bed that's full of asparagus. We have another one, which is a perennial. We have another bed that's got a bunch of rhubarb in it. And we're going to add some other perennials, and that'll be a future video. But we're not going to grow as much in the yard as we have in the past. We're going to be making some strategic decisions as the summer goes on based on timing on things and the weather and all that kind of stuff. There were things I grew last summer that we got absolutely 0 production out of because they were so badly chewed by rodents. That's a tough one because, you know, like I said, I don't use poison, and it's really hard to trap or to keep out rodents. If they're determined to get in, they will do a great job usually. But we sat down the other day and we worked through this year's seeds and placed a really painfully expensive order. I need to place one more order because we use multiple sources for our seeds. Our two most common providers are Johnny's Select Seeds and Haas Tools. Johnny's is an employee-owned company based in Winslow, Maine. And I knew it was in Maine. I had to read the name on there. And Haas Tools is a family-owned business in Norman Park, Georgia. So two different ends of the East Coast. But we have been impressed by both of them as a source for seeds. They have been very reliable. They are usually really good about having the germination rate right on the package. I want to know what the germination rate is because although this is germination rates are the statistics of large numbers, it still gives you an idea that if you plant 10 seeds, are you likely to get 1 seed, 8 seeds, 10 seeds? You know, it's all statistics, but it's nice to have a clue. And if you have something that's got a 93% germination rate and you get no seeds coming up, you have to think about what you may have done wrong. You may have done nothing wrong, but statistically you did something wrong. And you can reevaluate your circumstances and play scientist and figure out what's going on. So, time to talk about seeds this year. We have ordered a whole bunch of plants in, and like I say, that will be a future video. And we'll talk about why we chose those. When you are looking at what you are going to grow, before you go crazy and look at all the wonderful things that are in the seed catalog, consider what you actually eat. And that may sound silly, but I see people do this all the time. Why did you grow those radishes? You don't like radishes. Well, but they're so easy to grow. I feel so successful when I grow them. I don't like radishes. They're not my favorite. I can eat them, like if they're in a salad, and it's important to be polite at somebody's house, I'll eat them. I will not, however, choose to eat them if I'm cooking in my own house. But my husband loves them, so I grow radishes for him. The same thing with beets. I don't like beets. They taste like dirt to me. Okay. My husband loves beets, so I will grow beets because he really loves them. That's fair. I don't make him eat things that he doesn't like, that I like. So yeah, it's fair to do that. I see people all the time who say, well, my whole family hates this particular vegetable, but I grow it anyway and I make them eat it. Really? This is not the end times when we are having to eat just because it's all we have available. If that's the situation, I'd be eating those radishes and beets, seriously. But the point of growing vegetables is to grow things that you love. To grow the things that maybe taste so much better when you get them fresh. To grow the things that maybe you can't even get where you live. I cannot get, to save my soul, decent pak choi within an hour's drive. If I am willing to go to the east side of Flagstaff, I can sometimes get good pak choi at the Whole Foods there. Or sometimes Sprouts will have them too. But all these places are an hour or more drive from where I live. I cannot casually pop out to go get pak choi because I want to make a stir fry. But if I have it growing someplace, I can decide, that's big enough. I think I'll harvest part of it, or I'll harvest all of it, and we'll have a big stir fry. So grow the things that you love, someone in your family loves, or you can't get, and you love it. So the first thing on my list